So we have a major development in the nationwide fight over the ATF's prior pistol brace rule, and this one changes the landscape in a big way, because now the ATF has officially released the proposed new rule that would completely remove the prior Biden-era pistol brace rule from the books completely. But here's one of the key takeaways from the text that we just got from the ATF. They are not giving up their authority to regulate brace pistols purely based on the text. So while the rule is gone and the legal fight on that specific issue of the rule may be over, there is still a chance that this issue can pop up again. So let's break down what we just learned from this new language that we got from the ATF about pistol braces. Now, before we jump into this video, if you want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply by subscribing. You can also hit the like button that just tells the algorithm that you appreciate this type of content, and so it shares it with more people. I also want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to self-defense protection, in my opinion, AOR is in a league of their own. They're backed by an actual law firm, the Attorneys for Freedom, and they're always trying to give you as much as possible as a member. And right now, if you're interested and you want to sign up using the links down below, you can use my code ARMEDSCHOLAR and you can get $50 off of your individual sign-up fee or $25 off of the family fee. So if you've been following the channel for a while, you will know that this fight over braced pistols really started with the Biden administration and their new rule trying to regulate all braced pistols as SBRs. That rule claimed that most braced pistols were actually SBRs for the purposes of the NFA. Now, in response to that, multiple lawsuits were filed, and eventually you had a judge, Judge Reed O'Connor, who struck down the rule entirely, and he issued a nationwide vacatur of the rule. After that, most of the remaining lawsuits were dismissed as moot because the ATF agreed that the rule no longer existed. But one case remained, and that was the GOA case and the state of Texas case that they brought against the ATF, and it focused kind of on a bigger issue. GOA in that case is not just challenging the rule itself, they are now challenging the ATF's underlying legal theory when it comes to braced pistols. They're asking the court there to block the ATF from saying, even without a rule, we can still treat braced pistols as SBRs under the statute alone. So in other words, they want the court there to stop the ATF from regulating based purely on their interpretation of the statute. And now we got a development based on the ATF just officially releasing the proposed rule that revolves around braced pistols and their effort to rescind the prior Biden administration rule. They're proposing to completely remove the prior 2023 pistol brace rule that was put in place by the Biden administration. In the text, it states that the ATF proposes to rescind the changes made by the 2023 final rule and rely on the statutory language without further elaboration. Now, this is the key part. The ATF is not replacing the rule with a new standard. They are not creating a new test. Instead, they are going back to the raw statutory definition of a rifle, which is simply in this text also explained as a firearm designed and intended to be fired from the shoulder. Now, here's what this means in the real world, and this is how it impacts you. The ATF states expressly in the rule that individuals can resume purchasing firearms with an attached stabilizing brace and forego registration if the firearm is not intended to be fired from the shoulder. So practically, braced pistols are back on, and the mass SBR classification that was put in place by the Biden administration is now gone. But legally, the status of these goes back to the pre-2023 rule status. In the proposed rule, the ATF states that they will rely on a case-by-case classification to determine when braced pistols are actually SBRs. So this is a critical shift that is now happening with this proposed rule. Before, there was that Biden brace rule that was hyper restrictive, kind of covering almost every brace pistol and treating them, almost all of them, as SBRs. And now here we have no rule, and the ATF is just simply saying that the ATF interpretation of the statute is going to, kind of control on this issue. So essentially, they're going to go back to the old standard, looking at everything on a case-by-case basis. Now, this in many ways confirms exactly what GOA has been arguing in their lawsuit. The ATF is effectively saying we are dropping the Biden rule itself, but not the underlying theory that some braced pistols can be SBRs. They are still maintaining that braced pistols, in some situations on a case-by-case analysis, could be SBRs and therefore regulated. So now we kind of have two things happening all at once. On the one hand, the ATF is rolling back that Biden rule, admitting it created confusion and acknowledging that courts found it unlawful. They even admit that the rule was impermissibly vague and overbroad and failed to provide clear standards to citizens. But on the other hand, they are simply reverting back to the pre-rule standard and they are keeping the same potential enforcement authority just on a case-by-case basis. And this is exactly why the GOA case is still very important, because without a court ruling, nothing stops the ATF or a future administration from reinterpreting that statute once again, maybe putting in place a new rule, issuing a new classification on these items, or trying to enforce, broader restrictions on brace pistols just using this legal theory. And GOA is trying to block that and trying to stop that permanently. So stepping back, this is what we've now learned from this new language in the proposed rule that the ATF just released. The ATF is retreating from the rule that they lost in the courts, avoiding further, kind of bad precedent, and they're trying to preserve their authority also by saying, we're going to get rid of this rule. We're going to go back to the old standard, the prior, 2023 standard, pre-2023 standard, and we're just going to look at everything on a case-by-case basis. And in many ways, this is simply kind of a strategic reset going back to pre-2023. So for those confused, this is where it kind of stands right now when it comes to pistol braces. The pistol brace rule that we all, were under by the Biden administration, that 2023 rule, that has now officially been removed both by court cases and now the ATF in the proposed rule saying that they're going to formally rescind it. Brace pistols are effectively going to be back for now, but the ATF is still claiming that they have the power to regulate them under the statute and make determinations on a case-by-case basis like they did before. And that leaves one major question now going forward. Is this issue actually going to be resolved or just going to be handled differently depending on who's in power? Because this kind of still leaves the door open a little bit for a future administration to come in, maybe try a new rule, regulating brace pistols, because remember the rule was only struck down in courts based on APA procedure. There was no striking down of the legal theory. And so there is the potential that a new administration could come in and try to do this once again, or for the ATF to just try to be more aggressive in their enforcement just on the pure statutory language. So that's the pistol brace update based on the new rule language that was released today from the ATF. Again, they are formally rescinding the Biden administration rule, but there is still that issue that they're saying on a case-by-case basis, some brace pistols could be SBRs, but they are also saying we're going to go back to the old standard. And you may remember on that old standard, a lot of people owned and had brace pistols, used them, and there wasn't a whole lot of issues with that, just kind of on case-by-case basis, people are getting jammed up, but it is still potentially something that's out there. So that's where things currently stand. As we get more information, as it develops more, I will let you guys know. I will also be doing something similar with other rules that are released and, breaking those down and trying to give you guys the implications of what's going on. And again, stay tuned for more of those updates as we go. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.